Welcome every one of you for joining with us. I really appreciate it. Al Brothers, I'm honored to be the vice chair of the African American Genealogy Society of Fort Wayne. And again, our topic is medical genealogy and your health, Fort Wayne Research and Tools. And this is a partnership with PFW, University of Fort Wayne's Multicultural Center. I want to thank them for joining with us as well. First, let's get some information out here real quick in terms of what genealogy and medicine are useful tools for understanding the lives, times, and when combined together, they can create a powerful and useful family picture to help understand, recognize the present set of circumstances, and prepare us for the future. Now, medical genealogy, practice of tracing and recording family health patterns that are truly unique to your. Hopefully, you can go back at least 3 generations to provide information for your family practitioner. Provided my information to my family practitioner. It really revolves around family health history. Now, what is the importance of collecting patient family health? Well, one of the key help to identify a patient who has a higher risk for a disease, help the practitioner recommend treatments to reduce the risk of disease, provide early warning signs, and that's the key of a disease, and help you plan lifestyle changes for yourself and your family well. As I mentioned, who are we looking at? On the third-degree relatives, and again, we'll talk a little bit more about them next. And again, we're looking at the age for all the relatives, specific death for the deceased. Some ethnicity questions, because some genetic diseases are more common in certain ethnic groups. Also want to recognize the presence of certain chronic diseases. You need to get information about first-degree relatives. And again, parents, full siblings and children, relatives we're talking about, have siblings, grandparents, aunts and uncles, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, and third-degree relatives, first cousins, great aunts, great uncles. But the key here are great grandparents, great grandchildren. Now, these degree relatives really refer to specific generations as well. That's a key facet here. Now, how can I, compare? In this case, what I call a medical tree with a tree. Well, a standard tree is typically called a genealogy, and it talks about family relationships in a conventional tree format. And trees used in medicine and social, and I use the term social work, are known as genograms. Now, when you take a look at what a typical contains, and again, this is the information we all gather: the names, the birth dates, the the locations for each one of them, the parents and siblings, the grandparents alike. This is what is contained in the tree, and this is the typical chart. Again, going back to your great-grandparents, again, it talks about marriage and death dates on both sides of the family and locations. Well, let's take a look at something different here now. Now, this is a medical tree, a genogram. Circles and squares. Let me first go to the next one here. The symbols. Again, males are squares and females are circles. We talk about heart disease, diabetes, miscarriages, obesity. Let's go back. Now, this one may make more sense. Upper left-hand corner, heart disease with the X. In this case, the father died at age 65. The upper right-hand side, it talks about another death with the X, and 79 from obesity. And his wife has still alive, has diabetes. Chart like this is how these things compare. This is a medical tree. Now, for our medical genealogical purposes, we can do a couple things. We can update information on our family tree, make that in a little bit. We can add information to an existing tree. Again, you can just pin it in, You can create a tree with specific medical data for each person. So again, you can start a new tree, it has medical data in it. And as mentioned before, you should have at least 3 generations from both sides of the example of that. So again, you can use any format that you like. One with squares for men and circles for women. That's a good one also. Now, use this information. Information is used to identify disease or illness trends in your family. And most families have a family health history of at least one chronic disease. It may be cancer, heart disease. You may have a close family member with a chronic disease. You may have developed that disease, but you do want to recognize what it is so that you can provide information to younger family members about it. Also, fastest is at what age did they get that disease? Now, how can it help you personally? You have the most to gain through screening. And in many cases, healthy habits can help reduce the chances or risk for diseases that run in your family. Now, the standard screening tests like sugar testing, mammograms, and a colorectal cancer screening are keys to find early signs of disease. The key thing is try to go back more. The key is here, in addition to being a family genealogy detective, be a medical detective. Now, knowing is not an act on the information that we have. An example, has your mother or sister, another female member in your, talk to your doctor about, again, female members having mammograms earlier. Sister or brother have diabetes. Ask your doctor how soon you should be screened for it and how, again, you can help reduce the problem. Did your mom, dad, brother, or sister get colorectal cancer before? In this case, okay? Talk to your doctor about when to start getting colonoscopies or have them. Another one is PSA tests for men. Okay? PSA tests for men should be gotten, particularly after the age of 40, to identify cancer. And again, those are keys for men. And again, prostate cancer is most men who get prostate cancer don't die from it. They'll actually die from another disease. Now let's talk about some unique family situations. For each family, and a history of disease is different. In some cases, diseases that occur at an early age than expected, 10 to 20 years before people normally get the disease, diseases in more than one close relative is an indicator for. And the disease that does not usually affect a certain gender. And this is a classic case. I tend to forget about this. For example, breast cancer in a male. Now, nations of disease in the family, for example, breast and ovarian cancer or heart disease, and combinations that tend to flow together. So if a family has one or more of these features, family history may hold important clues about your risk and your family's risk for disease. In the case of death or illness, well, the number one key one is interview. Again, start with your parents, your siblings, and their children. Then add data from parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. And I'll show you this. Interviewing is a key thing. I had to talk to my sister about additional family members and what had caused their deaths. The second one is death certificates. And again, online. The third are obituaries, particularly in preceding years, did tell you what a person died from. That's not so prevalent today, though. Funeral records are key indicators of death. Mortality schedules, particularly those in the 1850s and the like. Insurance records, if you have access to them, can also provide like that. For us folks in the military service and pension records provide that kind of information. Social Security can provide that as well. You can also use, maybe the doctor, again, I understand HIPAA concerns, but they may be willing to talk to you about, again, more than one person. And always look at, if you have the opportunity, pre-testing results. What are they? Can you hear me okay? Oh. Okay, gotcha. Okay, sorry about that. Now, this is an example of, again, he was the oldest in my father's side there. And again, it talks, what did he die from? Renal disease. He also had prostate cancer and hypertension and other factors as well down below. This is looking for. And again, one of the key things that may provide you some information is handle it. And that funeral home still exists. The Riley Funeral Home still exists in Boston. As I was preparing this, I asked myself, what diseases have the years? So I started with 1900. So what were the top 10 leading causes of death in tuberculosis, diarrhea, heart disease, stroke, kidney disease, accidents, cancer, and diphtheria were the 10 leading in 1900. I said, let's compare it with something else. Let's compare it with 1920. Again, influenza and pneumonia were the key. Tuberculosis, stroke, kidney disease, cancer, again, accidents, diarrhea, premature birth-related conditions. These last two impacted my family on my mother's. But let's look a little further back. 18th and 19th century diseases. Well, are no longer prevalent today. Smallpox, typhoid fever, dysentery, malaria, yellow fever, and measles were deadly. And of the 19th century included things such as smallpox, typhus, yellow fever. Yes, my sister had scarlet fever growing up. And again, when she had it, my mother sent me down to stay with my grandparents while, again, she took care of my sister. Cholera has emerged as an epidemic threat and spread worldwide in 6 pandemics. So again, we don't see it as evident today, but these are the things that impacted families in the past. Now let's take a look at the health risks. And this was taken about 4 or 5 years ago. What are leading health? The top one was heart disease. The second was cancer. The third, unintentional injuries. Remember, work. Again, we just had it at one of our factories here. Are killed in accidents. They can be car accidents and the like. Homicide is number 4. Chronic lower respiratory diseases and kidney diseases. These are the ones that were leading risks that time period. Compare it with females. Again, the leading one is heart disease, followed by cancer, stroke, diabetes, Alzheimer's. Again, the unintentional. Again, the chronic lower respiratory diseases, but notice kidney diseases and septicemia, hypertension appear on this particular discussion of health risks for females. And these both are, gives you some insights in terms of, again, how some of the injuries or deaths in your family relate to the leading risks. When I ran across, and this was from a West Indies bit of information that shared knowledge, Black-related diseases with their North American colleagues. They were road diseases, but they were not. But they were not limited to tetanus. You see the term, well, I heard that term in many years. High infant mortality, worms, diphtheria, whooping cough, cholera, typhoid, tuberculosis, influenza, hepatitis, rheumatism, scabies, yaws, psoriasis, leprosy, and syphilis. These were what they were considered health concerns relative to African related peoples in the New World. Now, what about diseases specific among slaves? These were the key: tetanus, lockjaw, high infant mortality, worms, diphtheria, whooping cough, cholera, and typhoid. These were the leading specific diseases among our ancestors. Here are a couple of factoids. I asked myself, okay, how long did people live in the 1850s, actually 1800s? Well, in 1850, the life expectancy of a white person was 40, but notice for a slave, it was only 36. So again, there was a difference. One of the key things I found out, many slave owners had slave hospitals on their plantations to maintain the health of their slaves, in this case, their property. Again, it was a financial decision. They had to keep them healthy to keep them working. One of the key things that is very, very interesting to me, that there are outdated disease names, and we need to take a look at them and bring them forward to say, okay, what are they known as today? For example, one that was known as French pox is now referred to as syphilis. And I have a list here, and I'll show it to you, of outdated terms for diseases and conditions, along with their current names. So let's hit it here real quick. Now, here's the dictionary. Again, I'm not going to read them all, but again, epilepsy, blindness, apoplexy, stroke, black dog, depression, breakbone, dengue fever, camp fever, typhus, congestive fever, malarious. Now, I had an uncle, and I'll show you, he died from tuberculosis in around 1920, and it was called consumption at that time. Dropsy, falling sickness, which we know is epilepsy, and the French pox that we talked about before. Now we take a look at what? Green sickness, anemia, grip, flu, lumbago, back pain. That one I'd heard before. Mortification, I never heard used this way, but gangrene. Palsy, again, problems with muscle control. Ship fever, typhus. Swine flu, again, H1N1 virus. Term that we've heard in the past, change of life, it meant puberty or menopause. Winter fever, pneumonia. And we heard the term he went under or she went under, and they're referring to anesthesia. Now, what about illnesses and ethnicity? And again, we brought that up originally. Now, based upon your ancestry, can we perhaps determine what you might have a predisposition for, or it might even be present? We're talking about heredity and genetic diseases. Question, does ethnicity matter? The answer is yes, it does. Health and heritage. When we look at this, again, working with a specific self-contained genetic community, both geneticists and genealogists like it because it makes traits and patterns easier to identify and discern. Now, this is an example of a couple of groups of people who have unique illnesses or diseases. The Amish, Polish Jews, the Icelandic people, and the Arcadians. And each group has specific genetic challenges. Let me show you a little bit more. Here's one. Again, we broke them down into a couple of different groups. The Africans, if you notice up top, we're talking about sickle cell, cystic fibrosis, the Ashkenazi Jewish, a few more, Taxay's disease, cystic fibrosis again, the Asians, the Europeans, the French Canadians or Cajuns. But you notice for all of these, cystic fibrosis tends to flow through. And the last one is the Mediterraneans. So again, each one of these showed a likelihood, shows a potential predisposition for a particular disease. It doesn't mean you have it or will have it. It just means that there's a chance that it could exist. I ask myself, and I see, how can we keep track of information and data? Well, of course, I'm a data guy. So formats and templates, or spreadsheets and logs are key things for me. And this is an example of the headers for my collection sheets. And again, my health history, both father's and mother's side, and they are identical. Again, I always want to know what the relationship, as well as the name, the birth date, birth location, death date, death location, at what age did they die? What was their occupation? What was the cause of death? What were any other contributing factors to that? And this is true on both sides of my family. Now, this is an example on my father's side. And again, my great-grandfather and my grandfather. My grandfather died at age 96. He was a chef and a cook of coronary arteriosclerosis. My great-grandfather, his father, died at 74 of chronic nephritis. We'll talk a little bit about what those are. On my mother's side, my grandfather, again, he died when I was only 4 years old. Again, died at age 48. His wife, my mother's birth mother, Edith Brothers, died 7 days after childbirth. So again, from nephritis. And a contributing factor to it was childbirth. Now, this is just how I collect the data. Now, how do I display it? I have a log. And again, we'll go father's side and mother's side. Again, with the relationship, name, birth, and death dates, the age, cause, and other. And again, my own father, you can see, again, he died from coronary artery disease and congestive heart failure, but he did have spinal stenosis, and that does run through my family. Okay? My great-grandmother, Melissa Johnson, coronary infarct. And again, she had other diseases, and notice in the parentheses, it mentioned years. My great-grandmother, my grandmother, Elsie, Eveline, Martha, Lawrence Monroe, long name there. I knew her as Martha, then my grandfather always called her Eve, and then that's when I found out her second name was Eveline. She died from pneumonia. She had both dementia and hypothyroidism. So as you look through, again, my great uncle, Fred Monroe, he was the one who died from pulmonary tuberculosis, which he had for 3 years. So again, each one of these paints a picture. And when you look at the ages at which they died, we have a fair number of folks who lasted past the age of 70. Now on my mother's side, you know, a big difference here. Again, my mother died in 94. And again, she had pulmonary and renal failure. She had dementia. Her father, again, had a kidney problem, and his wife also had a kidney problem. We'll talk about that. But you notice these other folks I know very little about, because those are her real family from her real mother, Edith Burgess. I had never met them, the family, until potentially about 5 years ago, just before COVID broke, and I got to meet the family. But again, you can take a look at, you know, again, down below, my aunt had emphysema and died from emphysema. The other one died from lung cancer. And my uncle, who was 4 years older than I was, he died, unfortunately, from suicide, but he had lung cancer and depression. So again, these are the kinds of things, as you look at these were all much younger people. Okay, just a quick second. Just a quick commercial break in that sense. This relative to quilting. Now, what runs through my family? Spinal stenosis, both male and female. Dementia, prostate cancer. And again, one of the key things I recommend, and I recommend it to all the males in my family, get checked after 40. In that sense, too, for prostate cancer. Take a PSA test. Lung cancer, but look down below now, is kidney disease. We had kidney disease on both sides of the family in that sense, too. So again, and many forms of kidney disease. So it gives you some indications of some of the major problems that flow through a family. Now, how can we put it together? Well, I always recommend building a record, in this cases of illnesses and causes of death, and identify any unusual illnesses or causes of death. And also remember to check the major illnesses and outbreaks in the time period your relatives lived. It could be flu, smallpox, influenza, polio, cholera, measles, tuberculosis, which was also consumption. Growing up, I can remember the big concern about polio. And again, how many people polio itself infected or killed a year? And again, we have less than 5 right now that have been infected with polio. We have no polio deaths. But again, that was a major problem. Smallpox was wiped out. We run across flu each and every year. So again, these are the things that you look at. I did not find, for example, for the 1918, 1919, 1920 flu outbreak, the great flu outbreak, I did not find any of my family members who had passed away from that. That one did not impact them that way. Also identify if there are trends in males and females in your family. When did the trend start with whom? The farther back you go, the easier it is to recognize the onset of that trend. Build a medical genealogy tree and or log so that you can track that kind of information. Now, how do we share it and with whom? I talk about Family Tree Maker, and I'll share in just a minute. Share it with your doctors so they can document it in your records. Talk about medical planning and research for your family. If there's certain things that like diabetes that shows up in your family, again, let the folks know in the family, and it can be done with a family reunion, for example, as a topic. Share it above all with your kids and grandkids. Now, this is an example of information and how you can update it. And this happens to be Family Tree Maker. This happens to be the record of my 3rd great grandfather who died at 101. So he lived a long, healthy life in Massachusetts. And you can see here, you can customize on the right-hand side information. And again, death information. And again, it can be medical condition, for example. So again, you can indicate the medical conditions that impact your particular family. Now, we talked about DNA before. We can derive health information from DNA. And the 2 major companies that I have tested with directly are Ancestry and 23andMe. There are other companies that do that service as well. But the key questions on how effective they are center on the data availability, privacy, and accuracy. Now, this is from Ancestry and their traits. The questions are, why do you hate cilantro? They also offer 40 separate traits: alcohol flush, asparagus, cleft chin, earlobe type, and again, the whole gamut. So they give you some insights in terms of where you may have gleaned these particular propensities for. Now, 23andMe, they're using SNPs, and they tend to provide information about certain traits like eye or hair color and certain health conditions. And again, down below talks about the service that does provide that. Now, this is an example of the screenshot for Ancestry DNA traits. And again, it talks about nutrition, fitness, appearance, and sensory. So again, they may give you some insights in terms of what you have as a propensity for. And as you look back, it might be where you gleaned it from. Now, this is 23andMe. And again, blood and biomarkers. And it talks about the topics for each one of those. And they provide additional information relative to what they find in those areas. And there's certain traits. Now, on mine, I do have black hair. I do have a bald spot. It gets cold in the wintertime. Cheek dimples, I'm not sure that I have cheek dimples necessarily, but my sister does. So again, these are the kinds of fun things that you find out and find out that may resonate within your family as well. I provided you with a list of resources, and it's in your handout. All these are located. And again, remember, if you find a medical condition, Google it or do something like that. That'll provide you the best insight about what that particular condition contains, what it means to you, and necessarily how it can be treated or effectively reduced. In summary, one of the key things I want to point out is be a family medical genealogy detective. Investigate family health and illnesses and deaths back 3 generations or more. And investigate possible predispositions based upon race, ethnicity, or family origin. Again, all this says it's just a possible predisposition. Then secondly, create records to store the data. I've talked about Excel templates and health history logs, and share that data. Provide it to your family doctor and other relatives, because the more you share it out with your relatives particularly, the more information you get back to either confirm that it exists in that particular line, or to say, hey, you guys don't seem to have this at all. And get a DNA test to help better understand your ancestry and health traits. And use medical genealogy as another tool in your genealogy toolkit. I've talked quite a bit here and given you quite a bit of information. Are there any questions? Okay.
I have a question, Dr. Brothers.
Okay.
Okay, this is Rhonda from PFW.
Okay.
Sometimes family members are, hesitant on sharing this type of information. How do you think we can overcome that and get information to help us?
Well, again, remember, there's always more than one family member on that side of the family. So again, that may be gained from perhaps a family reunion or something like that, where there's more than one family member and people are willing to share based upon that. And to me, that's the key. Again, it's the sharing, because the more we share, the better we understand. And again, as we move forward, we want to understand as we get older what we might face. And also, what are some of the options for us to either avoid it or minimize it.
Okay, thank you.
And again, in my research, I reached out to my sister and my cousins to help me find information.
There, Dr. Brothers, there is a question in the chat. Could you share again how you set up your Excel spreadsheet for the family medical history as you found it?
Okay, I did 2 things. Number one, I had a collection sheet, the big collection sheet that I had that had information about birth, death, and locations, the whole gamut, and also another key one was their occupation, because sometimes things are occupation dependent. And then the family log, I whittled it down to the key things of what were the illnesses or supporting illnesses that caused that person's death. You notice I didn't show anything about any living person in my family right now. Well, we all have illnesses or challenges in some way or another, particularly as you get older, but I didn't share that. But I can say the spinal stenosis does flow through the family, and prostate cancer does flow for men. So again, it gives you some insights. I did not find, in talking with the ladies in the family, any breast cancer or things like that. So just one of the things. The other one that shows up in many families is dementia, in Alzheimer's. And again, it shows up so much later that again, our younger members, again, won't manifest at this point in time, but you need to be prepared to understand what's going on and work out the issues with your health provider.
Thank you. Another question from here on the Zoom, Charlie Wilson asks, would you find records of mental health diagnoses, and how will you set that upon your Excel spreadsheet?
The mental health part, that unless it can, I would put it on the other, realistically. For example, like dementia, Alzheimer's, and things like that. That would be a contributing factor. Now, dementia didn't kill my grandmother, but it was a contributing factor. Again, it helped wear her down. Again, she died at 96. My grandfather died at 99. So again, it didn't affect them that much. But again, it affected, for example, my uncle, who's 4 years old now. Tremendous depression because of stage 4 lung cancer. Tremendous amount of depression. Again, recognizing the depression that led to a suicide. So again, you can see that some of the causes that contribute to a person's death.
Thank you. In the comments here on Zoom, it's more of a comment. Vicky Sitz says her 29-year-old daughter was required to make a medical family tree as part of one of her mandatory classes at Ball State.
Oh, wow.
They took that assignment and have expanded it, and everyone in her family has a copy. Her copy is in her medical file at Parkview. And Vicki thinks this should be a part of the required health class for all high school students.
To me, remember, this is a combination of a couple of things. The information you're pulling into your tree, your medical tree, really is a culmination of your regular tree when you think about it. You're talking about, birth and death, the whole gamut, locations and the like. You've already gathered that information. This is just an extension of that as far as that goes by putting all that information into one place relative to your family as a whole. And remember, we did a program here a couple of months ago about putting meat on the bones of your family tree. And this is another way about putting meat on the bones of your family tree, because it provides you some insights in terms of what you might look forward to in the future, or other family members might look forward to.
Here's another question in the chat from Charles Wilson. Did you find rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and other autoimmune type diseases prevalent in your own family history records? If so, if you choose to share that information.
No, I did not. Again, again, it's a contributing factor in many cases. And so I didn't see it there at all. It may exist. Again, this is only a partial tree. I've not expanded that tree, again, with as many facets. Obviously, it may be out there, but I'm not familiar at all with any of those at all in my immediate family, or I'll use the term even extended family. I'm not familiar with it.
Okay. And Dr. Brothers, I know that this presentation is online and also in the room where you are. Are there any questions from people in the room?
Any questions from people in the room? No, none. To me, it was interesting because, as I said, being a medical detective helped an awful lot. Again, because you begin to recognize, again, patterns in the family. Again, looking at a death date and a death location doesn't mean as much as understanding how that person died, in that situation, and also where they died. In my genealogy journey, again, I had mentioned before that sometimes you'll find, over a female's, a mother's lifetime, again, they typically had children every 2 years or thereabouts, but before we had contraception, other things along that line. So again, if you see an extended period of time where there are no children, it may be that they died in childbirth, number one, or there was a major disease that really hit that community, number two. So again, these are indicators to you, particularly as you look further back. One of the key things that was interesting to me as I looked at the diseases was how many diseases I no longer see, in that sense. Again, our health professionals and the like have helped us maintain our better health status. So again, you don't see scurvy. Again, it's possible, yes, but you just don't see things like that anymore. You typically don't see typhus, for example, or typhoid fever, except in rare instances, and not in the United States. Typically, it's overseas someplace. So again, it gives you some indications on how the health patterns have improved over the years.
There are two more questions in the chat, Dr. Brothers. Rena Cheney asks, how far should you go back?
I could go back to my fourth great grandfather and grandparents, but I didn't actually go back that far. I only went back to my third great grandparents, because again, there are family records that talk about, again, what they died from and the like, particularly in newspapers, would you believe? Some of the newspapers were a major facet in that time period. Not so today, but in that time period it was. The newspaper was the internet and the Facebook of the day, literally in that sense too. I remember here in Fort Wayne, we had newspapers twice a day at some point in time. In Boston, for example, I remember, of course, morning and night newspapers. We also had mail twice a day. So again, it gives you some insights in terms of how that communication facet went so very well. We also, in my area, living in Roxbury, there's a fellow who compiled all the information, the goings on for the African Americans, and it was recorded in the major newspapers, as far as that goes, as was done here in Fort Wayne. So again, you had both a society page and just, I'll use the term, a general information page about the health and welfare of your community.
Okay. She was actually asking, how far back do you think she should go? How far back?
I recommend 3 generations, if you can.
Okay. There's another question. The handle is TYO Dimples. I love that. We had 4 generations with appendicitis. That's what he or she found. 4 generations with appendicitis.
Oh, wow. Good grief. And my recommendation would be talk to a health professional about it, because there are multiple causes for these things. For example, kidney disease was one. There were 5 different names for kidney disease, on my chart, but each one was caused by something else. There was an extreme case with my grandfather, and it was an end-stage kidney disease. So again, many of these diseases had multiple facets to them.
Okay, there's another, well, this is more of a comment from Craig Solinski. He says, thank you for the great presentation, and it was nice to have it shorter because many webinars are too long with too much information. This subject is very important.
And again, if I were working at a university, I could make it a course for a complete semester. I was just trying to give you a snippet to say how you can use information already available.
So Gary Franklin makes this comment, great topic and presentation. Have thought about commonalities in family causes of death, but hadn't thought to organize it this way. Loved the spreadsheets, more work to do.
It's true for all of us, literally, it is, literally. And again, for me, it was interesting because, again, I had to look up these strange disease names. I didn't recognize them that way. So it gave me a chance to do some further research in those areas. And again, many I recognized, a couple were either related to kidneys and kidney failure and the like, or others. So again, it provided me, since I'm not a doctor, and I didn't sleep at a Holiday Inn to gain that kind of knowledge either. But again, it gave me a chance to look at something different.
And Natalie Brewer says, nice presentation, so helpful, and offers much to think about and research.
Good. I mean, this is all it is. Again, genealogy is a journey. It is never an end point. It's a journey. And the more you journey, the farther you journey, the more information you gather and can share.
This is Rhonda again. I have a comment. When thinking about this topic, I was telling a first cousin about my brother who had to have his kidney removed. And she said, you know what? A couple years ago, I had my kidney removed, same side. So it is interesting that you really need to talk about these things to discover.
Oh, that's true. On a personal note, my 2 oldest uncles on my father's side both had prostate cancer. And I'll admit it, again, I had the onset of prostate cancer myself. But again, once I understood what was going on, I had the test. I had a treatment, and I'll use the term. I was able to stop it and cure it. So I've warned my son and my cousins and the like, all males, obviously, in that sense, to beware. It can be prevalent.
Dr. Brothers, I'm not sure that you properly introduced yourself at the beginning of this presentation. You want to tell us who you are and what you do for the society?
Oh, certainly. Alfred Brothers, I'm honored to be the vice chair of the African American Genealogy Society of Fort Wayne. And one of my roles is again, training, providing training support. I've been a genealogist for well over 30 years. and my areas of interest are particularly on the Virginia, Maryland, and that side, New England, and Canada, particularly on the east side of Canada itself. So again, it's been fun because each one of these provides a challenge, you know, in that sense, in terms of the kinds of research that you do and also the people that you meet. Again, I have an extended genealogy research group, family group that helps us collectively get information and vet it.
And also, we wanted to remind everyone that today's presentation is in partnership with FW. I always call it IPFW, but PFW, Purdue University, Fort Wayne Multicultural Center.
Correct. And again, I saw the question there about a template in the handout. It gives you I'll use the term the header for a template for both you know, information gathering and also for the log itself. And again, I use Excel. People do other things as far as that goes.
Again, this is Rhonda. I want to thank you for this partnership. I look forward to doing this again next year during Black History Month. I think it's important. And if you haven't signed up to be a member, I would encourage you to do so.
And one of the questions I want to put out to the group as a whole, and again to our board on next Tuesday, again, we had a deep dive into Alabama and Mississippi. I'm looking for the next two southern states that we should look at. The reason I picked Alabama and Mississippi was a large number of folks in our area had come from that area. And again, I'm not from that area at all, but again, it might be Arkansas, it might be Texas. I just don't know what the next two states ought to be. The goal is to, over this next year, you know, hit as many southern states as we can, to do a deep dive and work with folks and show them how to better understand and collect the information that's available.
You can learn more about our society online on our website, www.AAGSFW.com. And we're also on Facebook. So join our Facebook page. Oh, Rena would like to suggest Tennessee and Arkansas for your next Southern State deep dive. We'll take a look and see.
Okay. Again, we've got some good folks here who can help me with that. Again, the journey is not done alone. The journey is done in consult with others. Again, because we learn from each other. Having been an engineer in engineering school, the adage was cooperate and graduate. So we're all going to be engineers as far as that goes once we graduate. So I want to thank each and every one of you for joining with us. And again, keep providing questions to us, and we'll do our best to address them at one of our RT&T's workshop sessions.
Thank you very much. Oh, Rena is also suggesting Virginia and West Virginia.
Okay, got a couple. Okay, sounds good. Those are nice pairings as well. Okay.
All right. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you all.